It's September 2nd, and we're coming to the end of the growing season here, and I just want to do a quick balcony garden update. So some things grew well this season, some things didn't grow well. I used a new automated method for watering, and that had some upsides and downsides as well. So let's just do a quick review of the plants that we're growing here. So we have a lot of greens this year. We focused on Swiss chard, kale, and collard greens primarily. We also have a longevity spinach. So here's some Swiss chard, and the chard grew very well on this side of the deck underneath these lights. This isn't really a grow light, but this is just a 50-watt LED light, and it's helped to grow some pretty dense chard in an area that receives almost no light on the balcony. These lights are on for only about 6 hours a day, so we harvest from this daily to make smoothies. We've got some herbs, so lavender, oregano, cilantro, which is now coriander, and lemon balm. It smells really lemony. And then we have some collard greens. Again, this side of the balcony doesn't receive as much sun, so they didn't grow quite as vigorously as the other collards. And this is chard that doesn't receive any supplemental lighting, and you can see how it didn't really grow as well as the same exact chard that gets some supplemental lighting from this LED. So that's no supplemental lighting, little weak small leaves, and a lot of extra light. So this one was a little bit of an experiment, but these are sweet potatoes. They're grown from eyes of just potatoes that started growing in the closet. And here you can get a little preview of the drip system that feeds all of these plants. This is in a very small pot. It's only about 1.5 gallons of growing medium. These are in a trough that has a lot more growing medium. And then we also have some new Ford hook chard that we're starting up for the fall. This should grow into a pretty big plant, but they're just little seedlings now. On the same side, we've got the first of 3 pepper plants. This plant grows sweet orange peppers. I don't know the exact varietal. We eat them about as soon as they ripen. It still has lots of green peppers on the plant that we'll be eating soon, and they should ripen up quicker now that we're hitting the end of the growing season. See some more hanging down here. It's probably about 40 or 50 peppers on this plant right now, and we've eaten maybe 15 or so. On the same side, we've got a small ever-bearing strawberry plant. You can see it's still putting out strawberries even through September. It's even got some flowers still blooming. They'll become strawberries soon. The biggest production was in June and July, and it has slowed down since then. You can see how it is putting off runners that are growing all the way down, trying to find some soil. In all of the pepper plants, we've also been growing basil. Just threw it in the pepper and tomato pots. And here's some basil that kind of let go to seed to attract some more bees. But it has grown very vigorously, and that's partially because the pots are constantly watered, which is really the ideal growing condition for basil. So also growing on this side, out of the same trough as the chard and collards, is a cucumber plant. This is a Marketmore cucumber. It's late in the season for this plant, so it has slowed down a bit. It wasn't incredibly productive, but we are still getting some pretty decent cucumbers off of it. And this will continue to put out cucumbers until, frost or late blight takes it out. The main show on this side is probably this, or these 2 vigorous tomato plants. These are early girl tomatoes. This is an indeterminate variety. I'll try to get on the side to get a little bit better light. It's growing out of a 1.5 gallon pot right here, and it has the same drip irrigation system as the rest of the plants. These are blue mat drippers. You can see the little drip line running up to the pot. This has been incredibly challenging to keep watered without an automated watering system, since it's such a small pot and this plant is really large. It would have depleted the amount of water in the pot within a couple hours in the heat of the summer. So we have over 100 tomatoes on this plant right now. It's growing down the side towards the railing and also growing straight up and over the balcony on these wires that we have hanging across. There's 2 plants in this pot which I wouldn't do next year. The problem is that they compete with each other for resources, and you can see that one of the plants has withered a bit compared to the other that is growing a lot more vigorously. Okay, so moving over to the other side of the balcony, we have more plants over here. I'm just going to give you a quick view. We did lose a summer squash to powdery mildew, and I think that had to do with the planting density, a little bit of lack of airflow, and the fact that I didn't thin out the squash. So this side of the balcony receives about 5 to 6 hours of sunlight a day, and you can tell that the plants are growing much more vigorously here. We've got another tomato plant. This is a cherry tomato variety. It's supposed to be permanent, but has continued to grow throughout the season and put on new fruit. Still has plenty of more fruit to ripen up for us. By a few hundred tomato on here. Some are ripe now and some will be ripe soon. This plant's quite large, and it's actually started to encroach on the kale that we're growing over here. You can tell that this kale has grown much denser than the collards on the side that receives a lot less sun. We use this almost daily for smoothies. We've been picking it throughout the season. You can see, even down here, that we've been picking the kale up the stalk. It just continues to grow higher and higher and produce more. This is that longevity spinach, which is an interesting plant. It's actually not a spinach at all. It's a tropical plant that has edible leaves that are supposed to be very healthy for you. Again, you just pick it right up the stem as it grows. It does get a little spindly, so at some point you have to clip it. You plant that end of the stem and then it'll take root on its own. Got some more kale here. This is a red kale variety. It's growing in a very small pot. Each pot, though, still has its own dripper. You can see the dripper right here. This is where you adjust the dripper to set the amount of moisture that you want in the pot. So you open it up to drip more. On this side of the balcony you also have a lot of peppers. These are cayenne peppers, and this is probably our most productive plant. This is growing in a really small pot. You can see it here. This is probably about a half gallon of growing medium, which is coco-coir, and it's been very, very productive. Very hot peppers. Grew a bell pepper too, somewhat by accident. I thought it was a different type of pepper variety, but that's produced about 6 or 7 bell peppers so far, and it's got a couple ripe ones on the vine, or on the plant now, and some that may not ripen before the end of the season. So we'll see how that goes. This is the other cucumber plant. This is a diva cucumber, and it's grown more vigorously than the other because it receives some of the most sun of all the plants on the deck. I'll give you one sec to look at it from the other side. So we've been eating mostly diva cucumbers this year. The last plant on this side of the deck is the hops. This is a cascade hops, and it's almost ripe. You can tell because the hop cones are starting to get a little crunchy and papery. And once they start drying out a little bit more, get some really good resin built up, we'll pick them. So just to give you a little bit of a look at what's watering this whole system, there's a gallon reservoir back here, and that reservoir is automatically filled from a water inside of our house. You can see the inlet to the water filter right here, or from the water filter, and it fills to that's set by this float valve. So as the water is used up, the water level drops, the float valve opens, it pulls more water from the water filter inside and keeps all the plants watered out here. Now each one of the drippers requires a constant pressure that's set. Forgive a little bit of a mess back here, but this is a SureFlow water pump, and this provides a constant pressure to all of the blue mat drips. So that's the update for now. Again, coming into the growing season, getting a little bit messy out here, but pretty productive. Next year, probably will use RODI water instead of just filtered water through a mechanical filter and carbon filter, because we still have about 400 parts per million unaccounted for, though it's mostly calcium and magnesium. But that's made it a little bit harder to grow the plants effectively without flushing each one of the pots, because these plants are grown with zero runoff, so each pot is only given the amount of water that it will need so that it doesn't drip water onto the balconies below us. And that means that certain things like calcium build up in the soil unless they're broken down by bacteria to a state where they're usable by the plant. So our